would the coup leaders in Niger possibly get the idea that France had any interest whatsoever in intervening in its former colony? Well, it might have something to do with a statement that was put out by the French presidential palace, the Élysée, on Sunday that read, quote, anyone attacking French nationals, the army, diplomats and interests would see France respond immediately and intractably. And by French nationals, they mostly just mean one guy named Mr. Uranium, because Niger is France's top supplier of it, providing 15% of its total supply and a fifth of the European Union's. And the mineral is absolutely critical to power France's nuclear reactors. You see, France's energy independence is ironically very dependent on Niger, which would explain why French President Emmanuel Macron sounded awfully angry about something happening a whole continent away.
Anyone attacking French nationals, the army, diplomats, and rights of way would see France respond immediately and intractably. The President of the Republic will not tolerate any attack against France and its interests.
Yeah, those French interests would certainly include uranium. And now we've been hearing multiple Western press reports that the military junta, now in charge, has cut off exports of both uranium and gold to France, and that comes as really bad timing for Paris, which has become even more reliant on its nuclear power plants after cutting itself off from Russian gas with the rest of the EU to impress Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, in kind of the same way that college party guys work themselves into a frenzy and do dumb things like jump off a roof to impress girls. Germany is already on the verge of deindustrializing because Europe's economic engine can't run on wind and sun. Who knew? Apparently not Berlin. But at least France had not completely bought into Berlin's green fantasies and mothballed all their nuclear power plants, although Macron was certainly heading in that direction. So plan B after the Russian gas cut off was to power them back up. But now Niger has suspended the export of the uranium that they require with the immediate effect. But hey, no problem though, right? Because France has other suppliers like Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, except who largely controls the transport of those to Europe? Russia's nuclear giant Rosatom. Whoops. That doesn't really leave Paris with much wiggle room now that it's in conflict with all of these uranium suppliers. Lost in all these selfish foreign interests, though, is the will of the citizens of Niger.
We have to be allowed to do what we want, to appoint the president we need. Outsiders must not impose people upon us to manage us. That's the end of it.
As citizens of Niger, we're against the French military bases, the American bases, the Canadian and the Italian bases. All those foreign bases that are in Niger, we don't need them.
Our armed forces must not give in to any blackmail. Niger is resilient. We are resilient. What we produce, our GDP, is more than enough for us to survive. We call on the armed forces, the security forces, to resist those attempts to blackmail us.
It's interesting. When it comes to the conflict in Ukraine, Macron makes it all about the interests of Ukrainians. But when unrest breaks out in Niger, it's all about French interests. It wasn't that long ago that Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni was undressing France on the world stage and exposing its colonial interests in all their glory.
This is a child who works in a gold mine in Burkina Faso. It's one of the poorest nations in the world. France prints colonial money for Burkina Faso, which has gold. In return, they demand that 50% of everything Burkina Faso exports ends up in the coffers of the French treasury. The gold that this child goes down a tunnel to extract mostly ends up in the coffers of the French state. So the solution is not to take the Africans and bring them to Europe. The solution is to free Africa from certain Europeans who exploit it and allow these people to live off what they have.
In the end, Macron might try to dress up and justify his actions and frustrations as defending democracy in Niger rather than economic neocolonialism. But the reality is that the emperor really is just standing there in his fancy Lacoste boxer shorts by this point.